Well, welcome to another episode, guys. I am so excited because today I have the amazing Macy Hurst with me today. She is a Missouri cattlewoman, NCBA trailblazer, and so many amazing other wonderful things in this world of agriculture. And I'm so excited to have her on to talk a little bit more with everyone today about everything from being a woman in ag to starting your own livestock business to mental health and everything else in between. So, welcome on, Macy. Thank you for being here. And if you could just take it away and tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Lauren. So, I was born in mid Missouri, just outside of Jefferson City, Missouri, which is where I live now. And I was born into the cow calf side of the beef industry. I always joke that I knew my whole life that I would do it forever because I didn't know anyone else who did not. All of our neighbors, all my family, everybody was in the cattle business, and it was so much a part of our lifestyle that it just became kind of a staple of mine. So, got really involved in FFA and collegiate cattlemen's and all those things through my education. And then a part of that was when I was a senior in high school, my parents actually split up. And that was kind of the end of not only life, but ranching as we knew it. And when the dust kind of settled from that situation, my mom and sister and I, we got together and we decided that was something we were still really passionate about. We still really valued the responsibility of caring for animals and caring for the land and providing, a safe, healthy protein to consumers. And so we started Lady Livestock Company, and that was oh 5 6 6 years ago now, I want to say. So it's been a huge learning experience, and not easy by any means but so much fun, and I'm so grateful for the opportunities and the connections that have come from it. One of those being the trailblazer experience with National Cattlemen's Beef Association. I just came out of my year of that, although it's more so a launching point. So much has come from that experience, and I highly recommend it to anyone who's interested in the livestock industry. It was so beneficial. I'm so grateful for that opportunity. And then we also, so my family does Angus. My mom's sister and I, we have Angus, and then my now fiance, as of just a few days ago, and I kind of impulsively got into the Longhorn business, and we're looking for some land of our own. So excited to see what comes of that. And he's a Kansas boy. He spent a lot of his career on feedlots, so he's got a whole scope of knowledge that I don't, coming from the cow calf industry. And so I'm really excited to kind of see what we can do there. And then my full-time job, I actually work in sales. So I have an off the farm job, like so many of us in agriculture, and I do sales for Modern Litho Print Company. But I love doing that because I work with a ton of agricultural magazines, so lots of breed associations and state cattlemen's groups, and super blessed to get to serve folks in the industry in that way too.
Yes, absolutely. It puts you in a lot of really amazing rooms that, staying on the ranch sometimes doesn't always get us. I think that there's a great opportunity to be able to stay on the ranch if you have that in your family. But at the same time, having those off the ranch jobs or different things like that gets you in rooms that you would never be in otherwise. And it presents so many really great opportunities and meet so many new people and just see a different side of the business too, because agriculture is so broad and there are so many different facets to agriculture other than just ranching itself. And so I think it's really cool that you're able to provide both sides of the spectrum, I guess you could say, of starting your own livestock business with your mom and sister and also having a full-time position in town. Can you talk a little bit more about starting the business with your mom and sister and kind of how that's been going for you guys over the past few years?
Yeah, for sure. So I started buying cattle when I think I was 8 years old. My parents were very intentional about giving us the option and kind of setting us up if that's something we wanted to do. And both of my siblings and I knew very quickly it was. And so I kind of joke I got bit by the bug at a very young age, and so I'd built up my herd quite a bit by the time that kind of circumstance rolled around when I was in high school, and it basically led to I would call it like an involuntary liquidation. And so, at least from my standpoint, and so uh, it was a pretty hard pill to swallow, but it was also a kind of a chance for rebirth, I guess, and that's kind of the stage in the business that we're in right now too. Being in the Midwest, we were hit pretty seriously by the drought last year and really the years prior. And so, we had, I want to say 50 mama cows at our largest, but we just brought in all our replacement heifers, and with our replacements, we're sitting right at 25 head right now. And so, the average herd size in Missouri, and I want to say even the country, is just a couple maybe head off, but it's like 36 head. So for a long time, I was so self-conscious about, even as a kid, kind of like the size of our operation, how many head of livestock we had. And as a kid, our cow calf operation, we had like 450 head at some points. And so I look back and kind of laugh at that little girl who was so ashamed of, like, she wasn't brave enough to tell her story, because I lived by this narrative that, like, I'm not a real cowgirl. Like, I don't ride horses. And, we lived on a farm, but we lived on the farm that my grandpa had his cattle on, and our farm was across the county. And so all of these, like, kind of imposter syndrome thoughts. And today, ironically, I'm even more, not necessarily removed. I'm obviously still involved in production agriculture, but I live in town. You can just about see the state capitol from my front porch. And I, work in town full time, and I only get out to the farm, I would love to say once a week, but it's not even that frequent. And so thankfully, I have a network of individuals, my fiance being a big one of them. And then, of course, being in business with my mom and sister, we can kind of spread those duties. But yeah, it's been a challenge, and it really, they kind of say you find out who your friends are, but I think in agriculture we're so blessed to have this sense of community where, the livestock barn owners and our neighbors, and the people at the feed store or the bank or whatever, not everyone got on board with us when we decided to kind of restart and branch out on our own, but there were so many people who did, and who went to bat for us and were there to encourage us. And yeah, so it's been a journey, but a really fulfilling one, and one that we're really proud of.
Yes, absolutely. I think that that is such a powerful story to remember as people in agriculture, that growing up on a ranching operation and being surrounded by cowboys and all of these things, I had such a hard time myself calling myself a cowboy or a person in agriculture, because not everyone looks the same. And the stigma that I had in my head about it, or the stigma of how many head of cattle we had to have, or those different sorts of things, can be really preventative for a lot of people to feel like they have the authority to share their story. And I think that that's so important to remember, that every single one of us in agriculture, no matter our discipline or how many head of cattle we have a story to share, and we can't let that hold ourselves back.
Yeah, for sure. And something I've kind of come to the realization of, and this is kind of like my favorite talking point right now in my advocacy journey, is that, like, if you picture agriculture as a big puzzle, every single person who has a stake in agriculture, particularly farmers and ranchers, their story is a piece of that puzzle. And without everyone's story, we don't have a complete picture. And, when consumers look at that picture and there's pieces missing, like, we have to really be united in our mission to represent agriculture as a whole. And, whether you're in the livestock business or the row crop business or the, produce business, or you're conventional or organic or grass fed or corn fed, or you have 5 head or you have 5,000 head, every single person that I think has a genuine kind of, like, again, mission to serve agriculture, and has kind of a true hearted, I guess, approach at taking care of the animals and the land and the consumers at the end of the day, is such an important part of that puzzle. And I think it's important that we all tell that piece. And again, I think being a woman in agriculture, I've had the unique opportunity to do that, having started our own business with a livestock company that's given some opportunities. And also mental health, of course. I think that that's finally becoming a topic that we talk about in agriculture, and some of those stories with people who maybe have struggled with mental health, or who, their operations were kind of flipped on their heads because someone in their family lost to their battle with mental health, or whatever that looks like. Those pieces are still a part of the puzzle, and such an important part.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that analogy that you just gave of all of us having a piece of that puzzle. And it's not like other people in the industry have bigger pieces of the puzzle than you, just because you have a smaller operation. We all have such an important role to play in that story of agriculture. Can you expand a little bit more on sharing your story in agriculture and just like throughout your advocacy journey, how you encourage people, farmers, ranchers, produce producers, everyone else in between, how to share that story with themselves as well?
Yeah, Lauren, I love that you said no piece is bigger because I got goosebumps when you said that. But yeah, no, you're totally right. I think something that has been really fun in my advocacy journey. I mean, I've been public speaking since I was in high school. FFA brought me to that, and then I've done a lot of writing. I've been writing for different publications since I was a junior in high school, and so that's given me a lot of kind of room to grow as a communicator, but also to learn so much and to engage with people I typically wouldn't have. And social media, of course, is kind of a blessing and a curse, as many know. But as a young woman in agriculture, there's such a huge network of people a lot like me and people who are a lot different from me. And it's given me the opportunity to connect with those individuals. I frequently get messages or comments or whatever from people who are questioning, not necessarily from a combative standpoint, but just like genuinely having questions about what it is that we do on our ranch. And why do you treat an animal that's limping with an antibiotic, or why, at what age do you butcher, and why is it that at that age, or whatever. Very just, again, genuine curiosities of people who didn't grow up in farming and ranching. And it's really cool because I think a lot of times people are nervous to come at us with those questions because they don't want to feel silly, or they don't know enough to know, like, hey, that's not a dumb question, that's a very, very reasonable question to ask, and we're happy to answer it. And so that's really taught me kind of the just the importance of being very, very non-judgmental, and remembering that not everyone was raised with the experiences we were raised with. Not everyone drives past cattle on their way to work. Not everyone has even seen a live animal in person. We a couple years ago, I was doing some work for the Missouri Beef Industry Council, and we held an event in St. Louis, and they brought out a bunch of elementary age students, and they several of them, 8, 9, 10 years old, had literally never seen a chicken in their lives. And so just thinking about that, where so many of us had chickens in our backyards growing up, it's, you have to come into it with that idea that, like, first of all, these people are not uneducated, right? So these people who may be doctors or lawyers or pilots or tradesmen or teachers or whatever, like, they are experts in their field. This just happens to be the field that we are experts in. And so if we had questions about their industry, we may feel silly asking them too. And if they were on the other side treating us like we were idiots, think about how that would make their industry look. So it's so important to me to remember and to share that with other people too, that if we create this kind of safe space where people say, I have this question, but I know that if I go talk to Macy or Lauren, they're going to answer it, and they're not going to make me feel dumb, and they're going to make me feel reassured about where my food comes from at the end of the day. So that's probably been my biggest lesson, and something that I think we're getting better at as an industry, but lots of room to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that is so important to approach those conversations in a sense of you're talking to someone who has no experience in this. And we were blessed, in a sense, to grow up with roosters chasing us in the backyard and have those horror stories. I'm sure that many people can relate to that. But there are people in this industry and in this world that we're seeing for the first time this year people that are 5 generations removed from ever stepping foot in an agricultural sector at all. And that's absolutely baffling for me to even try to comprehend, but it's just reinforces the fact that it is so important for us as people in agriculture to get out and share our story. Can you expand a little bit more? So we touched a little bit on the like practicality of sharing it, but there is such an emotional aspect of sharing your story as well. And I think that that is where we get a true connection to people. Expand on that a little bit more.
Yeah, I think really that kind of goes back to the whole, like, being true to your own story conversation too, because so much of what you think may disqualify you from being like a true cowboy or cowgirl may also make you a really like familiar or easy to relate to for somebody else, you know? So
Yeah.
like I love to shop too much. And a lot of the places I shop, you know, you won't see any farmers or ranchers there, but you'll see a lot of young women who are making buying decisions for their families. And so getting to kind of just be authentic to myself and, you know, maybe I strike up a conversation with them and we get to talking about, you know, where their beef comes from. That happens frequently. And it's just because I'm not, you know, like, again, when I was a kid, I wore cowboy boots to school every day because I was like, if I don't, how are they going to know that I work in agriculture? Like, and so just kind of now being able to fully embody who I am, like, as, you know, a woman and as a young person and all this, and, you know, and there are so many opportunities, again, just if you make yourself available and you kind of, you know, like, if people know that you're kind and that you have answers to your questions, they're going to come to you. But whether, you know, that's at church or on an airplane, or maybe social media is your thing, or maybe you're in a position at work or with the organizations that you're involved with to reach a lot of people, you know, the I think the best thing you can do when it comes to new opportunities is to say yes. And I'm learning a kind of a hard lesson is that you don't always have to say yes to opportunities, but, you know, if there's an opportunity that comes along and you think I can really make an impact here, you know, maybe it's a little outside my comfort zone, you know, I'm not used to talking to 100 people at a time or whatever that looks like, but you think that your story will have an impact on that crowd, which, again, everyone's story is important. And so yeah, I think taking those opportunities is a really good, at least, first step.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that those opportunities don't have to always look like speaking engagements or standing up on stages or stuff like that. Start with your neighbor, just like you said. Start with your coworkers. Start with the people that are in your circle right now. And in a sense, they could be your practice dummies. Like, you're not going to get judged or ridiculed by them. I know for me, it's like, okay, if I need to run something, like I'm doing a speech or something, I need to run it by my fiance first because he's going to be the first to tell me, hey, Lauren, that I don't understand that at all. That makes no sense. Like, you're speaking way too much in agriculturalist terms right now. Dumb it down a little bit for me. And it's one of those things that don't be afraid to just start. Like, I think that that is the biggest thing with all of this is starting is the hardest part, and starting to share your story. Once you get that first portion done, that first group of people you've talked to done, then it gets easier and it gets easier, and you get better at sharing your story and sharing your elevator pitch and everything like that. That just don't be afraid to just start and find those people that you can kind of share that with, for sure.
Yeah, I talk to a lot of collegiate groups, whether it's cattlemen's or ag communicators or whatever it is. And something I tell them is that even if when I go to share my story, you know, like, even if I don't feel comfortable doing it, or, you know, maybe I don't feel like I did my best that day, I'm hoping that they come out of it with one or two perspectives. One, like, oh my gosh, that was so inspiring. I'm so inspired. I want to go tell my own story. Or two, that was terrible. I know for a fact I can do better than that, and I'm going to prove it. So, like, regardless of how it turns out, you're going to inspire action somehow.
Yes.
And again, like, I think that just by speaking up, you're kind of empowering other people to speak up for themselves. And, you know, again, maybe that's starting a new operation. Maybe you inspire someone to get into the industry, or maybe you inspire someone to, you know, to talk to somebody about their mental health issues because you shared about yours, or maybe you inspired them to just post about their farm or ranch on Facebook, you know, whatever that is. Like, I am a firm believer that everything happens for a reason. Like, your little actions are going to create reactions, and as long as you go into it with the good intentions, I think good will come of it.
Yes, absolutely. That is so powerful. I love how you touched on that if you go into it with a good mindset, like, there's no bad that can come to you from that. Even if you absolutely biff that presentation and it sucks, there could be someone in the audience that is saying to themselves, I can do better than that. I'm going to go share myself, and all of those things as well. You touched on mental health a little bit, and I would love to start diving into that. It's one of those topics that I am so grateful that we are finally starting to talk about in agriculture. As someone who grew up surrounded by mental health issues, not necessarily in a terrible way, but I had a firsthand experience of seeing a rancher with mental health struggles in my father and all of that stuff at a very young age, and them not having the resources or just the community to tell them like, hey, it's okay to not be strong in this moment and to go get help for yourself in those situations. I would love it if you could expand on that a little bit more.
Yeah, so I'm also very excited about the fact that this is finally something people feel like they can talk about. And I think there's a lot of work to be done too. There's obviously a stigma, and a lot of people still consider it, I call it like our cowboy culture, right? Like we're mean and tough and we've got all this grit, but like at the end of the day, one of the strongest things you can do is like admit when you need help, right? So I grew up around some mental health struggles too and didn't know it until I was kind of facing my own. So I am a very, very anxious person. I struggle a lot with anxiety, and which growing up, like I had somebody say one time, if you can speak in front of people, then you're not an anxious person. And I was like, like it was so frustrating because I was like, you don't even understand. But that's why it's so important, I think, to talk to, professionals really. Something else I say whenever I speak to collegiate groups is, the biggest advice I can give you is learn how to admit you're wrong, learn how to say you're sorry, and go to therapy. Because at some point in life, like we're all going to hit those rough patches, whether it's a breakup or our parents' relationship or health issues or financial issues or whatever that are going to put a strain on us mentally. And it's nice to have someone there to kind of, whether it's reassure or help us work our way out of it or whatever that looks like. And I was kind of facing a lot of that all at one time at one point. And my grandpa, who lived in Florida at the time, I hadn't seen him in months. He called me and he was like, Macy, I can tell, like, you're not you. And he said, I have a therapist not far from you, and I would love to pay for you to go see him. And I was, first of all, baffled that my grandpa went to therapy. Like, I would have never guessed. He was one of the coolest, like, most like he just seemed to have his whole life together. And so whenever he said that, it was very like humbling that like, yeah, at some point we all need that. And I also think that, again, the more we talk about it, the more we will talk about it, the more other people will talk about it. And so, yeah, I highly recommend, whether that's, I think talking to people in your life is always great, but I think it's really, really good to have someone who's not super tied into your life. But at the same time, just again having these conversations and kind of being there for other people and making sure, again, that we're receptive, like, to that idea that when somebody says, hey, we need help, like that's not a weakness, like that's like when it's time for us to step up and be there for them. And in rural America, for the longest time it was, well, we don't have the resources. Like, we don't have, the town I grew up in had 200 people in it. We had a church, a feed store, and a gas station, and my mom owned the gas station. Like, it was that kind of town, so like we didn't have a therapist in town. The closest one was half an hour away. And so but now, there's so many resources, with whether it's telehealth or just however you can find your mental health resources. But I think the hardest part really is still overcoming that idea that if I reach out to this therapist, if I, even reach out to my best friend or my husband or my wife or my parents, if I tell somebody, then they're going to think I'm weak. When in reality, again, the strongest thing you can do, not only for yourself, but for the people who rely on you and the people who love you and the animals that, rely on you, that is say something and ask for help. And I read something one time that farmers and ranchers are notorious for taking care of their animals and their crops and their land and all of that better than themselves. And, like, would you totally neglect, your land or animals or whatever that was suffering? Like, no, that's literally your job, is to take care of them, but you forget to take care of yourself. So I think, again, just really being aware that, like, you can't be who you want to be or who you need to be for your family or your farm or ranch or whatever without prioritizing yourself and your mental and your physical health. And yeah, it's a pretty big concept, I think, for a lot of folks, especially with that cowboy culture mindset, to wrap their heads around, but an important one for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I love how you talked about the strongest thing that you can do is ask for help. And I think that that is something that is so important that so many people really sit on for a minute and just sit on the idea of asking for help and kind of contemplating with yourself, like, where in your life right now do you need to ask for help? Maybe it's not in a mental health aspect yet, but it could be if you don't ask for help right now. And that's why I am a huge proponent of therapy myself as well. I love my therapist. She's the best woman in the world, and she's even in agriculture herself. So she gets it. Like, she fully understands, and it's one of those things that it's a preventative aspect. Like, yes, I started
Mhm.
going because I was having issues, but now I continue to go to continue to just like oil those whatever, you know what I mean. I'm trying to make an analogy and it's not working, but you just continue to go and better yourself right now. That way, when those deep valleys do come, or those heartaches and like troubles in your life or in agriculture do come, you don't, it's hard to make that decision to go to therapy when you're in the valley. And so the best thing you can do for yourself right now is reach out while you're still okay, and while you still feel all right. That way those disciplines are already in place for when things aren't all right. And when you do need to ask for help, it's a lot easier for you to approach someone in that scenario of saying, like, hey, I've been doing this for years. Maybe instead of going for once a month, I'm going to go every 2 weeks now, or something like that. Like, I just need a little bit of
Mhm.
extra support in my life that isn't my wife or isn't my kids, because that can put a lot of pressure on people in your life that we are here for you as your family, but there's only so much help we can give you as your family.
Yeah.
And I think that it is so important to just go outside of your normal sphere of people. Because guess what? Like, I love my fiance to death, but I cannot talk about my fiance to my fiance. Like, it's one of those things. Like, and you don't want to have to like always be bouncing off of different people. It's not other people's burden to bear in your life. Genuinely, like, I say that from the most loving place possible, that it is
Mhm.
not their burden to bear. And it's very strong of you to ask for help and to just seek that in the first place, I think is the best step that you can take as a person in agriculture, and kind of like getting over that hump of it being one of those stigmas or things that are taboo and not cool to talk about, or things. But you know what's really not cool? Losing someone that you love to a mental health issue,
Mhm.
or being in that situation where you are so low in that valley that you can't crawl out by yourself, or things like that. Like, that's really
Yeah.
not cool. So it'd be better for you to get over that embarrassment or the shame associated with asking for help in the mental aspects, um, than to put, honestly, such a heartache on those around you and the animals that depend on you and everyone else in your life than it is to just take the uncomfortable step right now.
Yeah, for sure. You said a lot of things that I really like that you mentioned, like the preventative thing. I would say, like, do you take vitamins, or like, are you careful about what you eat? And again, so many of like our stereotypical farmers and ranchers don't and aren't, but it's it's one of those things where like you have to take care of yourself so that you can take care of your families and your farms and ranches and all that. So like, yeah, if you go to a medical doctor, or you go to like an accountant, you take care of your financial health. Why can't you take care of your mental health? And so and then too, the whole like kind of the hills and valleys mindset. I'm My faith is a really big part of who I am and how I approach struggles too. And I'm a firm believer that faith and therapy go hand in hand. I think God gave us therapists for a reason. And both my faith and my like mental health journey, something that I've kind of learned is that, like, whether it's your faith or your therapist, like, you are going to hit highs and lows in life, but having something to tie back to kind of like on a supernatural level, but also like someone you can talk to, really like kind of takes the sharp edges, I think, off of like the hills and the valleys. And so instead of having these huge highs and lows, like, yeah, you're still gonna have highs and you're still gonna have lows, but it's not gonna be as tumultuous, and it's not gonna be as hard to recover from. And so, yeah, I mean, like I said, for me, that's my faith. like my faith in God's plan, which of course I'm not perfect. I have lots of questions about that plan sometimes, but believing that He has one, and then also knowing that like He gave us resources here on earth to help us kind of like balance out those highs and lows in life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that is something that needs to be talked about more in the mental health aspect in space is our relationship with God and our relationship on that level. And I think genuinely for me, when I started really focusing on my relationship with God and being diligent about praying more and being diligent about actually studying my Bible. And you know what, guys, I will be the first to say I haven't opened my Bible in a hot minute, but I do have this amazing Bible app where I can put it in my car and listen to the Bible while I'm driving or something. Like there are ways to make it work into your life. But find God in your life, find God in your relationships, and really try and reignite that love and relationship that He has for you, because like you said, He gave us these resources for a reason. And as farmers and ranchers, I think that we are so blessed to have just such a close relationship with Him, and the fact that you can go off of your back porch right now and go look outside and just take a deep breath and look at the creation that He has made. And there is so much beauty in that like I was raised in a ranch that we didn't go to church every single Sunday because you know what? It wasn't possible every single Sunday. We had to work cows or we had to do something else. But if we were horseback on the back parts of our ranch, gathering cows that day, my dad would always look at me and say, "This is my church. This is God's biggest and best creation, and look at the beauty that is right here, and just absorb it for a minute." And I think that if you are struggling with your mental health or stuff like that, like even if you don't have the willpower to go ask for help right now, just go ask God. Like, just take a second to be by yourself, turn your phone off, turn the TV off, turn out all the noise, and just go ask God for help. And just be honest and be like, "Hey, big man, I'm struggling right now, and I really need you." And He praises your honesty. Like, the thing is, guys, He knows that you're struggling right now. He knows that you're in a valley, but you coming to Him and asking for that, He cannot give unless you ask. And it's one of those things that just go step out on your back porch, sit on that porch swing, or go take your horse out onto the back pastures and just be in His creation for a little bit. And if that's your first step, that's an amazing first step. We all have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And I think that reigniting your faith and getting really close with Him again is something that is sometimes overlooked in the mental health sector.
Yeah. I love that. And I also love any opportunity I get to talk about cows and Jesus in the same conversation. So I'm very much enjoying this. But yeah, I actually, one time I shared about a mental health thing I was going through on Instagram, and someone messaged me and said, "How can you say you're a Christian and then go to therapy?" And I was like, sorry, I'm not seeing the connection. And they said, "Well, God's the ultimate healer. You shouldn't need a therapist." And I said, "Well, when's the last time you've been to the doctor?" And also, like, if God is the ultimate healer, I totally agree with you. God's also the ultimate teacher, and you still went to school. So, like, God gives us these things to, like, He can't help us if we don't help ourselves. I mean, I'm sure He could, but like, we have to help ourselves, like He gives us these tools. And, but yeah, no, I totally agree. I've noticed the deeper in my faith that I get, which again, it's been a second since I've opened my Bible, so I feel you there. But the deeper in my faith I get, the more those kind of blows that come through life are softened. And, again, like, nobody said it was going to be easy to be a Christian, but oh my gosh, at the end of the day, it is so worth it. And yeah, just to, like you said, even be able to step outside and just be grateful for what He gave us, and for His consistency, I think, and just His constant presence. It's just, it's overwhelmingly calming, I think. And so, yeah, I also encourage people, if you're going through something, that's a really good place to go.
Yeah, absolutely. I read this thing one time that has completely kind of turned my view on struggle on earth into a different light and flipped it on its head. Because there is struggle, there is pain. We're going to go through those lows and through those valleys. But I read this thing that pretty much the gist of it was, this is the only time in our lives here on earth that we are going to be able to praise God during the struggle and during the hurt. This is the only time that we are going to feel pain and suffering and angst and anguish and anxiety and depression and all of these really hard things. But this is also the only time that we're going to be able to praise God through it. Because when we go to heaven, there's not going to be any of that. And we're going to be praising and worshiping him, but in a different light. If we are able to sit here on earth and praise and worship him through the hurt and through the pain, that is something that can almost turn something so horrible and hard into something really beautiful. That it's not always going to be easy. And as Christians, we're not called to live easy lives. And I think as people in agriculture, we are so close to God in so many aspects in what we do and what we see, but sometimes we're never further away at the same time. And I think that immersing yourself in his creation, but also just acknowledging that it's not always going to be easy is another thing too, that through these valleys and through these lows, your relationship with him is going to be the thing that sustains you. Like if you continue to push yourself towards him and use him as your rock rather than the bottle of whiskey on the counter or the horse in the backyard or things like that, like you can't put your rock in something that is so earthly and all of your strength in something that just isn't going to be able to sustain you through those hardships and things like that. So I think that is so important, and I love that you brought that up.
Yeah, no, you make so many good points, and yeah, we're blessed.
Yes, we are. That's
for,
it. Yes.
like you said, the rock. I sometimes I wonder, and not necessarily. I don't judge them. I just wonder, for folks who don't have a relationship with God, like where do you anchor yourself? And again, not from a place of judgment. I just know that without having that anchor and that constant, that thing that's not going to go away tomorrow, or whatever it is, that I could not stand myself without just that kind of anchor point. So anyway, loved all
absolutely. Of that. Yeah, like there was a point in my life where I didn't have him as my anchor, and I genuinely look back and I'm like, how did I make it? How did I go through all of those really hard times? And genuinely speaking, I didn't do it very well, guys. Like I had so many clutches that were not what I needed to be leaning on in those moments and in those hard times. And I'm so grateful that as a young adult, I have like reignited that relationship with him, I guess I could say. And I think it's one of those things too, that the prodigal son story is one of my favorite stories in the Bible. And we are never too far gone or too far separated from God to go running back to him. So I think it's one of those situations right now that if you haven't opened your Bible in a while, or if you haven't sat down and prayed in a while, or maybe you are sitting here and you're like, I don't even know if I believe in God. Sit down and just run back to him. Sit down and open yourself up to him. And just, if you are a believer and you are a Christian, I'm talking to you right now, that just go running back. You are never too far gone. You are never too far in your sin or your hurt or your depths and valleys to not go running back to him and to find that strength in him again. And if you are not a believer yet, just open yourself up to that possibility and to that opportunity. Message Macy or I, and we would love to talk to you more about Jesus. I know we would. Cows and Jesus, I'm all about it. Like, this conversation has gone in a way that I didn't expect it to, but I am so excited, and it's just been phenomenal. Like, we will sit here and talk to you about cows, we'll talk to you about Jesus, we'll talk to you about everything in between. Right. And this is a safe space, and I think that as people in agriculture, we need to open ourselves back up to that safe space for mental health, safe space to talk about Jesus, and safe space to talk about cows, because we're going to do it either way, so we might as well have fun doing it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yes. Okay. So we have touched on so many other topics, whether that be mental health and ag, our love for Jesus, and a little bit of everything else. I would love to kind of start diving into, as a woman in ag, kind of what
Mhm.
that looks like for you and what that journey has been like. Because I think genuinely looking back on my life, we are probably some of the first people, probably the first generation to really be able to start our own cattle businesses and start
Mhm.
our own at a young age. Our parents were able to do it. We had some lovely women in ag in our parents' generation or grandparents' generation, but on our own, truly. And kind of what that has looked like for you as a woman in ag, and what advice you have for young women in ag as well.
Yeah. So you make a good point that there are so many women that came before us in the agriculture industry and were very influential in it. And I think a lot of them probably didn't get the recognition they deserve. We even here in Missouri, we had a governor a few years ago who he got up to speak at our like our agriculture ham breakfast at the state fair, and he made a comment about thank all all you men out there in the audience, like thank you for being here. And then he was like, "Oh yeah, and you women who keep the books." And I remember I was an FFA student sitting in the audience, and I was like, "Is he kid? Please tell me that was a joke. Like it wasn't a funny joke." But and sure enough, like that was just he's not from the country, and so now we're blessed to our lieutenant governor and our governor are both cattle ranchers. And but yeah, back then I just thought, okay, so that's what kind of the the stereotype that we're going up against. And but we do have so many powerful women starting their own ranches or maybe taking over family ones. You've interviewed a lot of them on this podcast, and it's so neat again to hear all the different stories and the backstories. And I have friends that are they don't even know how many generations now, ever since their family, moved to the US, that they've been in the cattle business. And then I have friends that just bought their first few head, Marky Hageman Jones, she's Girls Eat Beef too. Hopefully folks are following her on Instagram. She's awesome. But she just started her own ranch, like just her and her husband. They just bought some heifers and they went to town. And it's just so cool that, like you said, that we can do that. And I think the industry as a whole is again kind of like becoming more accepting of that and uh, adapting in a way. I think where it gets tricky is that like we as women are not victims of the industry, and we're not necessarily even unique. Like 34% or whatever it is now of people in the agriculture industry are women. That's awesome. And it came because of a lot of hard fought battles of those women that came before us. But we also still have a lot of work to do to break some of those stereotypes about the women in the industry. And, I've had people ask me, well, why do you get your nails done if you claim to work on a farm? And it's just like, how are those related? Like, yeah, I understand I probably break more nails than the average person, but like, I still want them to look nice. And, like, I still like to wear high heels and get my hair done. And like, it's just that, I think people sometimes forget that there is very much still a place in the ag industry for femininity and for women. And you don't have to change yourself or become all callous to like fit into that mold that is a women in agriculture. I don't think there is a mold, and that's what's so cool about it is anybody's welcome.
Yeah, absolutely. I love how you talked about that. As I'm like, if you're seeing the video, I'm waving my hot pink nails around right now. Like, yes,
Well,
I break more nails. And I think that there is so much power in the femininity of being a woman, that we have abilities that men do not, as just the same way that men have abilities that we don't. And not to say that no woman could ever do anything that men do, or vice versa, but it's one of those things that I think that leaning into that, there's a lot of power in it. And I think that there's so much beauty in that as well, as women in agriculture, that we don't have to sacrifice who we are, no matter who you are, in your heart and soul. If you're the one that goes out and wears a full face of makeup every single day to go sit in the tractor and all of those things, that's beautiful, that's awesome. Heck yeah. If you're the
mm-hmm.
girl that rolls out of bed and you're wearing your brother's old Levi's and a sweatshirt and a hoodie, like, that's beautiful too. There's so much
Mm-hmm.
beauty in all of it. And I love how you said that there isn't a mold. Like, this is an industry that welcomes you and loves to have you. And I think that just continue to empower each other. Like, this is an industry that we are able and so blessed to be able to see other women in agriculture, especially with the rise of social media and everything like that, that let's cheer each other on in this journey, and not forget to praise the women that came before us, that were those trailblazers, that kind of laid out a path for us to be able to have company credit cards, or to own cattle, or have our name on everything like that. There's so much beauty in that. And I think that it's one of those things that we shouldn't be ashamed of. We should be able to be celebrating.
Yeah, absolutely. I think too, just kind of like overall, like I typically don't associate myself with like modern day feminism, but I think there is kind of this movement, society wide, that, like the best kind of successful women don't step on other women to become successful. They like
Yeah.
drag them to success with them, right? So, like, or the concept, that rising tides, like, how does that go? Rising tides raises all ships, or you know what I mean?
Yes.
That, like,
Yes, I know what you mean.
it's yes, it's not a contest, right? Like, again, we all
Yeah.
have such unique operations and backstories and goals, and so being more of a connected network, just speaking about women and ag as a whole, and Instagram and social media has been a really cool kind of avenue to make that happen. But we can certainly all be successful together, and in our whether our goal is to be a successful mom, or to be a successful rancher, or to be a successful salesperson or teacher, whatever that looks like. We can all do that together, and I think that's a really cool part about women in the ag industry, is that of course it. I think a lot of times, because of the nature of the ag industry, it does feel really competitive, or almost like we have to prove ourselves. Maybe it's even, we're being pinned up against a man, which, that happens, and it's going to happen whether it's applying for a job or a promotion, or, but I think it's so neat that as an industry, we are so encouraging of each other, and we're such a community that, we can kind of encourage and empower and learn from each other, and yeah, make sure we're all kind of on our way to success alongside of each other.
Yeah, absolutely. I love how you mentioned that, like, real leaders and like real people that are on the top are the people that bring the others along with them. They're not the ones that are looking back at the top of the tower and closing the door behind you. They're the ones that are
Mm-hmm.
dragging you along with them, even if it slows them down sometimes. And I think that if you are a leader in the industry, that is so important to remember sometimes, because I personally have a hard time, like, um turning around sometimes and checking on those that are in a sense behind me or following in my footsteps. And it's one of those things that, like, there's so much stigma around a lot of things in this industry as a woman in ag, and it can be kind of competitive. And I think that might just genuinely be the fact that we were all raised around a bunch of men, and we might just be a little competitive to our core. And that's me a little bit. I'm just competitive at my core. I had a little brother growing up, and we played WrestleMania. Okay, like, I'm just a little competitive, and sometimes I have to remind myself that I'm not in competition with the other women in this industry. I am here to pave paths for the women coming along next, and also to bring those up along with me that are in this generation right now, and continue to give people a platform to share their story, or to just be trailblazers in the industry. I keep on using the word trailblazer.
It's a good
Thanks, NCBA.
one.
But yes, absolutely. I think that is just so important to remember as leaders or people coming up in this industry, that we all have a place. And the ag is so broad. Like, the word agriculture is such a broad term. And whether you are sitting in an office as a marketing agent right now, or you are being a mama back home raising a bunch of little ones and on the ranch every single day, we all have such important roles in this industry, and none is more vital than the other. Because if we didn't have the
Mhm.
marketers, we wouldn't be able to reach those unreached groups in the inner cities. And if we didn't have those mamas back home raising a bunch of those feral little ones, we wouldn't be able to bring up the next generation and things like that. So I think we all have such an important place in this industry. And whether you're like Macy and you're starting your own business with your mom and sister, or you are a 10th generation rancher, it it's really beautiful when you can find your own place in that. Can you talk a little bit more about how it works with family dynamics of starting your own business with your family and the challenges that I'm sure we all are very aware of working with family and things like that as well?
Yeah. So for anyone listening, if you've ever worked with family, you know it's not easy. um, but especially I think on like on the livestock thing, you know, people always joke about like I'm sorry for what I said when we were sorting cows or whatever, and that can be very true. But
Yes.
no, I obviously love my family. It was kind of fun when we started because we got to kind of identify like our specialties, and so like I was in college getting an ag com and ag business degrees at the time, and so I was like, well, I got the social media marketing, you know, and the sales, and we were doing a lot of direct to consumer beef sales at the time, which we don't do a whole lot of anymore. But it was just like, okay, well, I can do that. My sister's like, she was getting ready to graduate from high school, and she's like super friendly and bubbly, and people love her. And so we were like, well, if we get a farmers market stand, like you're our girl. And then my mom is like semi-retired, and so she had like the time to you know go to the farm and kind of be more hands-on. And then of course like my sister and I both having moved back home, we all live here in town now, and you know like those roles shift as life phases shift. And you know like for example my fiance, since he's been around, you know he's kind of taken over as like the hands on the farm thing because he owned his own business when we started dating. And so like he was like, well, you know, I can run out there this afternoon, you know, or if cows are out, you know, like I can't, I would have to at that point. But you know, it's a lot easier for someone who owns their own business as a full time job to run out there and help. And so he's been a huge asset to our operation. And also, I think we kind of got stuck in this like, well, this is the way we've always done it. You know, he used to ask me that, like, why do you do this the way that you do? And well, this is the way. It's just the way we've always done it. And that is one of the most dangerous phrases that you can use on a farm or ranch. And so he's kind of pointed out a lot of those weak spots, and we've gotten to kind of improve there too. So, but yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of transition really in the next couple years for us. Don't know what that looks like, but yeah, my sister's married and she has her own business, and she actually gets to start here at Modern Litho with me very soon, which I'm excited about. And my mom is retired, and I think she's you know kind of looking to simplify life a little bit, and maybe that means staying involved on the ranch, maybe it doesn't. And then of course my fiance and I are very very involved in the industry, and we hope to you know continue to grow, whether that's growing Lady Livestock alongside our own brand, or maybe you know just getting more invested. There's a lot of change to come, but I will say working with family is a huge blessing. It's one of those areas outside of your comfort zone that lends the opportunity for a lot of growth. So no, it's been really good, really positive, and I think we all came out of it better because of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's so much positivity that can come out of working with family, even if you have to remind them that what I said in the working pen does not count. All of those things, you know, me calling you all of those mean words, don't take it to heart. My lovely fiance, I love him to death. He did not grow up like in a cow calf operation like I did. And so I'm waiting for the day that we get our own cattle, and I'm having to remind him like, hey, I love you so much. Do not forget that while we were in here. Like if I'm yelling at you because you're working the grate wrong, it's just because I love you. It genuinely is. Like it's out of the best of my heart and all of those things. But I love to hear about people kind of like expanding their businesses as they grow into the next season of their life as well. Like I think that it is so important to remember that as we as individuals grow into the next season of our life, our businesses are going to change and they're going to evolve with us and things like that. And it can be scary and daunting, but it can also be really beautiful that, you know, with you and your fiance growing your amazing longhorn business and just everything else with that, it's gonna change a little bit and the dynamics of things are gonna change, but there's a lot of beauty in that, and it can be really really cool to be along for that journey as
We
well.
have a guy here in Missouri. His name's Wes Tucker. He is with the University of Missouri Extension Office, and he does a lot of training on succession planning. And I will say that's not really
Yeah.
something I considered until I heard him speak. And having those conversations now, you know, and just preparing for really whatever is to come, so incredibly important. And you know, if the generation before us, you know, because I think Lauren, you and I are kind of like the next generation of our operations, right? And so like
Yeah.
getting to learn from the people in front of us and them being able to kind of let go of the reins just enough to where we can take over just a little bit, and not giving us, you
Yeah.
know, giving the ranch to us necessarily, but like giving us the opportunity to learn and to fail and to learn from those failures, so that one day whenever we are the head of the ranch, we are prepared for it. Like just those experiences and those conversations are so important. And yeah, that applies too to, you know, people marrying into the family or people moving away from the ranch or whatever that is. But yeah, the more communication that happens, the less I think the less conflict will happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that is so important to remember, that as you are coming, if you're in your mid 20s or late 20s and finally in a position where you are coming back kind of to the ranch and taking over some more roles and stuff. I have joked several times on this podcast that I came home from college and my dad was like, "Oh, she has an opinion now." Okay, buckle up, guys. Because it's one of those things that, hey, I had a college education. I thought I was, you know, the shit, and I knew everything. But, you know, lo and behold, I did not know everything. And I try to humble myself very often these days to remind myself, you do not know everything. But it's so important to, like, kind of, in a sense, give the reins to those people coming home and give them different responsibilities in that succession line. That way it's not just like, okay, so my father has passed away now and I am 50 years old and have 4 kids and I don't know what I'm going to do with all of this. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know what I'm doing. I don't even know where our cattle records are kept anymore. I
Mm-hmm.
think that, you know, finding your own position and role. And if you haven't listened to the podcast with Letty, listeners, go back and listen to that one. It talks about like kind of finding your own place in the industry and in your operation. But I think it's so important to kind of start dabbling in that as young adults and figuring out where our place is and what we like doing on the ranch. You know what? Maybe as an individual, you don't love going out and checking cows every day, but your brother does. Hey, that sounds great. I'll do the marketing, you do the checking and vaccinating or things like that. Like, it's just finding what you like and what you love. And I think that that's what makes it sustainable as well.
Yeah, and there are so many just devastating stories about people losing farms or ranches because of kind of like what you just said, you know, well, like dad died and he did all of this, and now that
Mm-hmm.
he's gone, like we're left with no like managerial knowledge really, because he never let us try anything, or he never let,
Yep.
you know, or you know. And so yeah, that's super important. Also, as far as your dad's comment, when I came home from college, my mom and I had several discussions with her saying, Macy, you are not my mother. So I think maybe that's just a general across the board graduate thing.
Yeah, no, I feel like we can probably all relate to that in some aspect, way, shape, or form. That, yeah, we probably all had some sort of conversation with our parents in that aspect, whether it be a sarcastic comment of, oh, she has an opinion now, or a serious conversation of, okay, settle down, Rocky. You're not taking over the operation today. We're not going to be able to
Mm-hmm.
change everything overnight. Like, yes, these are all great ideas, but like, let's take a step back and look at what we've got right now and kind of go from there, type of thing as well. So, yes. So we have talked about so many really phenomenal and great things today, whether that be mental health and ag, secession, Jesus and cows, and a little bit of everything else in between. And I have truly just been so blessed to hear from you, Macy. And I know that everything that you have said has resonated with our audience in some way, shape, or form. I feel like we touched on so many things that if someone didn't get anything out of this episode, darn it, go and make a better episode with someone else because there was something here. So use this as either light your fire to go share your story or learn something from this, or a light your fire that, you know, Macy and Lauren's conversation sucked so bad, I'm going to go make a better one. So I hope that that's what you got from this conversation. One of the two. No matter if it was the latter, maybe just don't leave a review or comment in the captions. I think we could do without that. Appreciate it. Thank you. Move along. Anywho, but Macy, I would love to hear your one piece of advice that you can share with a young person in agriculture coming up, whether they be a collegiate person in college still or a young person in the professional world in their mid to late 20s or just anything in between, pieces of advice that you may have for them coming up in agriculture.
Yeah, a few of my like main pieces of advice that I do give when people ask are a lot of the things that we talked about today. You know, the kind of humility behind learning to say you're sorry and to apologize, going to therapy, taking opportunities as they come, just opening yourself up to two different opportunities, and then like being very authentic to yourself and letting the opportunities that are right for you find you because of your authenticity. But something else that I learned a few years ago, my mom's best friend always says, "What's the worst they can do? Say no." And the concept behind that is to just ask. You know, if you're trying
Yeah.
to get an internship with someone who doesn't offer internships, ask. If you want, you know, a job, but they're not hiring, or so it's not posted or it's not on LinkedIn or whatever, reach out and ask. If you're
Yeah.
interested in getting in the cattle business, but you don't know where to start, find a professional, you know, somebody in your area that is in the cattle industry and ask. And I
Yeah.
think that is such a powerful tool that is sometimes forgotten. She displayed it to us. We were in the drive-through at Arby's, and they had the shirts with like the animal stacked on top of it. It was like a cow and then a pig and then like a sheep and then a chicken or something. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's kind of a cool shirt. And she's like, do you want one? And I was like, they don't sell them. And she said, what's the worst they can do? Say no. And so she said, hey, can I get some of those T-shirts? And they said, let me go ask the manager. And the manager came back and said, how many do you want and what sizes? And it was just, I was like, okay, that's a pretty powerful tool. That was really cool. So
Yeah.
that's just what I tell people now is like, again, like if you want something, ask for it. There's the worst that can happen is they say no and you're right back to where you started and you're not out anything but a couple seconds to ask the question. So that's a really powerful tool that I encourage people to use.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that is so powerful. And it just reminds me a lot of like my experience in sales and stuff like that. And I'm sure that you relate to that very heavily too, that you have to just ask and you have to put yourself out there to get rejected and don't be afraid to get that no. Because you know what? The worst thing that they're going to say is no, but the best thing that they're going to say is your next step, is
Mm-hmm.
your next goal, is your next interaction or things like that. Like, um, I think that it's one of those things that, you know, be humble and don't be afraid to just go ask. Don't be afraid to go ask for that position that you are way underqualified for, or to ask for the t-shirt in the Arby's drive through, or just different things like that. I love that you shared that. And Macy, I have so thoroughly and wholeheartedly enjoyed our conversation today. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And I look forward to continuing to connect with you throughout this agricultural season that we're both in. And if anyone would like to find you or connect with you, can you share with them a little bit about where they can find you on the different platforms?
Yeah, so I'm probably most commonly on Instagram at Macy.Hurst, Macey.Hurst. And I'm on Facebook, and you're more than welcome to reach out to me either of those places. And if I can ever help, I'm happy to connect offline too and chat about, yeah, Jesus or cows or whatever you want to talk about. So, Lauren, this has been awesome. Thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in, and we will see you next week on another episode of The Next Generation. Oh my gosh.